Hi folks, John Cordisco back again. Round 8 of Norway Chess 2015. I skipped round 7, those of you that are wondering. It was 3 draws. They were okay games, but we want to go where the action is. Decisive games. Magnus Carlsen is white, current world champion, having a horrible tournament. Probably the worst start he's ever had in probably 10 years. And Aronian, number 2 for a long time in the world from Armenia, is black. Interesting game, interesting game. Let's get to it. Carlsen is white, Aronian is black. It's going to be a close relope. Bishop, knight, typical stuff. Of course, we all know that the pawn's untakeable. Bishop, bishop b7. I'm not really so sure about that. Bishop c5 is what the computer calls for, and I kind of agree, but there's always the danger later, of course, that once you go d3, your bishop, and that's a really nasty pin right there, and the bishop will be out here. So I think Aronian is playing it solid. d3, b5, moves the bishop back, and d6. Now this is what I've always wondered. c3 is what he did here. But the computer goes for knight to c3. Let's say he does that. I always found that bishop here is incredibly annoying. Incredibly annoying. You'll end up, how are you going to guard the bishop or the knight? And I never really cared for that. And I've always been spooked by it. And it's just funny that the computer now goes h3, which stops that. But a close second, basically the top 3 moves are tied. It's knight c3 and bishop e3. So, what to do, what to do. c3, castles, rook e1. Knight goes to a5 to hit the bishop. Bishop moves back to c2. That's why he went c3. And then c5, which is really good. Now when the knight comes back, the c-pawn is in here, and you've got 3 really forward pawns here for black. So I like black, and the computer shows black as a tiny advantage, but it's basically the same. So we're on move 10, and Aronian has managed to equalize with black. At this level, that's huge. Knight c6. Still waiting for that bishop to come out, but knight f1, h6, just to guard the g5 square. Knight e3, typical relope stuff. You put the knight on f1, and sometimes the knight jumps to g3, and sometimes it jumps to e3. e3, rook e8, just developing. Pawn, bishop b6. Now, grandmasters do this a lot. And us amateurs, whenever there's a capture, especially pawns, we always take it. These guys like to leave the tension on a4 and b5. d4, here we go. We're going after the center for a break. E takes, c takes. Knight to b4. Leaves. Now there's 2 pawn captures, and they let them sit on both. And that's what these guys do. So we should learn from that. That just because there's a capture, especially pawns, doesn't mean we have to take it. Only when it's to our advantage. And that's a really good spot for that knight on b4, by the way. Bishop b1. Pawn finally takes. Computer likes queen takes or d takes c5 first. Now rook's coming up. They're all pretty close. Magnus decided to take with a rook. If he had taken with the queen, then after d5, e5, knight e4. I didn't think really that that's really so hot, to be honest with you. After rook takes, bishop f8. Get the bishop right out of the way. Plays good defensive role. Plus, stops blocking the e file for the rook. And Magnus just decides to go rook to e1 or a1. He could have went a3 too. That's just as good. d5, e5. Now white's getting some space here. Chase that knight off. h3 to stop that annoying pin that we talked about earlier with the bishop here. Queen b6. Knight takes, bishop takes, bishop takes. Instead of rook takes, if bishop takes, rook a d8. And it's a piece and a pawn for a rook, but those center pawns and that d pawn is going to be going soon. So b takes was the correct move. Rook a to d8. Computer didn't hate that move. It didn't love it either. It thought that rook e to d8 was much more precise. Bishop takes, rook takes, bishop e3. Doubles up the rooks. D takes, bishop takes, queen to b3. It didn't take. And then bishop takes, and then queen takes, or excuse me, rook takes. Not as good as queen takes. Because after queen takes, rook takes, knight c2, of course. Rook takes a6, knight takes, pawn takes, rook b5, and white's just doomed. It's a knight and two pawns for a rook, but look at white's pawns are just butchered. Double e pawn, single b pawn. After rook takes, a5 for Aronian. And so far, this has been a pretty good game. White's up a pawn, but Black's playing okay. He's doing well. e6. Just the force. F takes, isolate the pawn. If you can't really defend it, and you're going to spend all your time defending it, just get rid of it. And that's what he does. And now he doubles up, getting to get the pawn back. He can hold on to it for a while, but not for very long. Knight d3. Rook checks. King h7. Now queen a4. Magnus is looking to get his queen down here and start harassing the black king. Queen takes the pawn. He goes for it. But he decides to go e4 check instead. Now this is where it starts getting dicey. It seemed pretty innocent for a while. All of a sudden now, it can get crazy. Rook to f5 is really the only move. g6 loses, of course, to rook to c7, and the rest of it's just, he just gets slaughtered. Rook to f5. And this is a move that Magnus pulled out of his hat, and not really, because white's got a back rack problem. And he doesn't want to really get his king in any bind. So what he basically does is just show some patience. Don't rush in the attack. Get your king in a good spot. And that shows a lot of maturity on Magnus's part. And knight to f4. Now it starts getting dicey. Look at all those pieces starting to pile around on the king side there. It's about a 1.5 point advantage now for white, believe it or not. For those of you there wondering what would have happened if knight had taken f2. Queen a8. Queen f6. Rook checks. King. Queen checks. Queen. Knight checks. King. Queen a4. And it's over. This is where I think Magnus not so much lost his nerve, but he was getting really short on time around move 35. And Magnus isn't noted for being in time trouble. He just wanted to get to move 40. You got to remember, this is one of the worst tournaments he's ever played in. He needs to get 50%. We're around round 8, and there's only one round left. So I think he just played solidly. He played queen to c2, which dropped his entire advantage at once. He should have played knight to h4. Then after queen takes, rook to g3. And he's doing well. Very well. But after rook to c2, this is where Aronian goes wrong. On move 36. Move I just pulled out of his hat. Queen to a1. Now I can understand his premise. He wants to move the queen here, and with the knight and the queen, make the white king. But he should have went, and this is a computer move, and I don't blame Aronian for not finding this. Stop the video now and see if you can find it. It's really complicated, but it has certain principles. And that is queen to b8. Now, could Aronian find that in time trouble? I don't think so. But the whole premise of this whole thing is, look at the diagonal here. That could spell danger in the future. G3 and the knight to D5. And white has to be extremely careful. That discovered attack could be brutal. But he went queen to A1 instead. G4. And Magnus, of course, finds the move after he goes queen to F1. What a great defensive move this is. It's just amazing to me. What's the threat? This pawn. How are you going to guard this pawn and corral his queen at the same time? And that's knight to E1. What a beautiful move that is. What a beautiful move. It blocks in the queen. It guards this square indirectly. And where's the queen really going to go? Going to have to go back here to get out. Because the threat is rook and then rook trapping the queen. So he goes knight to H5. Takes the rook. E takes. Now I think all of us would play queen takes F5 almost instantly. That's why these guys are grandmasters and we're not. He's up almost a full rook. He just goes queen to C4. And that's where Levin Aronian from Armenia, one of the world-class players, resigns. Give you an idea. Queen has to take. Because knight to G3 is next. Queen takes. Rook takes. It's over. Queens are off the board. You're up a full rook for 2 pawns. Also, if you want to look at taking the pawn, I think a lot of us would. After rook to G6, queen takes, king takes. And that's pretty cool too, to be honest with you. But that's just a scenario I didn't want to get into. Once you see the win, you see the win. So, tough break for Levin Aronian. Carlsen pushing hard. Almost miscued. He had to be careful because Aronian was right on him, but the kid had enough to hold him off. So Magnus is trying to crawl back in this tournament. One more round to go. We'll see if he can get even. That would be least safe face. In the tournament here, the Norway Chess is a series of 3 tournaments. They call it the Grand Chess Tour. And no matter what place you're in, you accumulate points. Now, there's prize money for each tournament. But at the end of the 3 tournaments, the cumulative points score, depending on how you place. In the other tournaments, there's also extra prize money. So even if you're not going to win this one or even be in the top 3, winning every game is important, even if you're towards the bottom, because it adds to your cumulative score over the 3 tournaments. So there you have it, folks. One more round to go. We'll see if Topalov can pull it off. Right behind him, right behind Topalov, right on his heels, or is my buddy Karl Nakamura from the U.S. and former world champion Vishy Anand from India. They're trying to catch up to Topalov. We'll see if they do. Until then, I want you to remember, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.